It was Thanksgiving Eve, and it had been a long day of preparing, and a lot of family was coming. And I finally crawled into bed, and I picked up my computer, and I was looking at Facebook. And I had this overwhelming feeling like I needed to find my cousins. So I typed in Laura's name, and she immediately popped up. It was really overwhelming at first, but I looked at her, and I said, that's Laura.
And I kind of hesitated at first because we hadn't seen each other in 35 years.
We started to communicate, and then we finally scheduled a phone call. I dialed, and I heard Laura's voice for the first time in 35 years, and it was quite different than when we were children. And we just had a really, really nice conversation.
Well, it was easy until Mary said, "Why do you think we haven't seen each other in 35 years?" And I thought, oh, this was going so well.
So I told my story of remembering how Laura's parents went through a horrible divorce, and her dad was living with us, and there was talk about how the girls had said that our grandfather had molested them, and I tried to communicate that to my uncle, her dad, and my parents, and it didn't go as I thought it would. And with all that being said, we were separated, and we just didn't
never
see
saw each other again.
That was the end of it. Laura and I were really, really close as kids.
Yeah.
And I was close to her sisters too, but not in the way that we were. We had a really nice connection and a really good bond.
And that picked right back up, and there were so many parallels in our lives. I mean, our experiences were quite different. I had a parent that believed me. My mother believed me. And so there was never a time when I couldn't talk about it. There were times when I didn't and when I really struggled, but it was never because I couldn't talk about what had happened
But
to
I
me.
couldn't.
That was not Mary's experience.
No, that was not it was buttoned up, and that was the end of it.
But even given that difference, there were unbelievable parallels in the choices that we made and the self-destructive behavior that we had and the people that we brought into our lives. I mean, it was staggering, the number of similarities that we shared, even despite our sort of different experience coming out of the abuse.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, we decided to get together. So Laura came to visit.
We wanted to do something to sort of embody where we'd come to with this. And so we decided that we were going to go dance on our grandfather's grave. And not as I think some people have taken that as a sign of disrespect. And it honestly had very little to do with him. It had to do with us saying this terrible thing happened, but we're still here.
He had our past and a huge, huge part of that, but he will never, ever have our future, especially now that we're back in each other's lives.
We have joy in our lives, and we're happy, and we're healthy, and it was really about that. And so we set out to do that and started driving to the little town where he's buried and where our abuse occurred.
Well, we realized I could not remember where the cemetery was.
Yeah.
So we looked across the street, and there was the police station, which is like this big. And we said, let's go ask for directions.
We started off by asking for directions.
Mm-hmm. And he said, go here, go here. And then I looked at
We
Laura.
looked at each other, yeah.
And then I looked back at the man behind the glass, and I said, we want to report a crime. And he looked at us, and I said, our grandfather molested us 35 years ago, and we want to report him. And he said, okay, hold on one second.
I thought they would, at best, humor us. Mm-hmm. I thought that they might say, I'm so sorry, that's terrible. You know he's dead. Mm-hmm. There's nothing we can do, but we're so sorry that happened. I didn't expect a formal report to be taken. I didn't expect it to be taken so seriously and to really have our loss honored that way. So at the time this happened, I'd been blogging for several months, and after Mary and I reconnected, I decided to write about my abuse. And so I wrote about it and had what at that time was an enormous response compared to my previous post. I had a lot of people, express their sorrow that it happened, but a lot of people say, oh, that happened to me too, or I know someone. And so when this happened, it just seemed like the right thing to do, to write about it and to share the experience. I think Mary got up at 7 the next morning, and I just pushed my laptop over and said, it's done. And she read it, and I wanted her to read it before I posted it.
It wasn't so much a narrative, it was truth. It was like an account of what had happened the day before.
Mm-hmm. And You know, I've had so many people ask me, wasn't that hard to write? It was the easiest thing I've ever written. It wrote itself. I mean, it literally took me less than half an hour to write it. The first day, I think 40,000 people read it. And the second day, 80,000 people read it. And I began to get inundated with people commenting and telling their stories, both on other people's blogs and on mine, in private messages on Facebook, in emails, hundreds and hundreds of people saying, me too, or my sister, or my daughter. People that I knew well, not, you know, strangers or people that I knew peripherally, but good friends of mine in high school, good friends of mine in college, good friends of mine in life. And then Mary wrote about it and had the same experience that I did in terms of people that you knew well.
40 people alone just immediately just said, me too, me too, me too, me too, me too. And, you know, people that I had very, very close relationships since I was young in different stages of my life.
I wish our story was shocking. It's not.
It's not.
The only thing that is different about our story is that we are telling it
We're
shamelessly.
telling it shamelessly. You would not be ashamed if you got deliberately hit by a car. But as a victim of abuse, we all carry this dark, dark shame, and we don't want anybody to know about it.
You get told that it's unspeakable, and so you do just that. You don't speak about it, and you carry it around in this little pocket in your heart, and it infects everything. It infects everything. And the only way it doesn't is when you integrate it as a fact, not the fact, not the defining thing about you, not the totality of who you are. It's one terrible thing, one traumatic thing that happened to you, but it's not the only thing.
But we don't realize that when we're in it.
No, you don't know that when you're
You
little.
do not know that when you're in it. You don't know if you're little or if you're in college and you're assaulted or as an adult.
No, you feel alone.
You feel alone.
You get sold a bill of goods. You feel like you're alone, so you don't speak about it. So we're all living this in our lives in a way that's toxic and harmful and unhealthy when it doesn't have to be that way.
You have a choice whether you want to treat it and you want to do what you can to change it or stay mired in that horrible, horrible past.
Your story is being told either way. Your story is either being told because you're speaking your truth, or your story is being told, as Mary touched on, in addiction, in eating disorders, which both Mary and I had, in promiscuity, in abusive relationships, in insomnia, in all of these things. That's your story being told. It's just your abuser telling it. You're just not in charge. You can have this terrible thing happen to you and do something with the experience in your life, which is what we're determined to do.
Right. And we talk about this all the time, that we're putting work boots on our pain.
Right. Giving it a job.
We're giving it a job. By staying silent, these sex offenders have every opportunity to keep on going.
You know, Maya Angelou said there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. I think that's true. I think that Mary's and my story speak to that truth. Whatever you decide to do with your story, it's time to tell your story.
It's time to tell your story.